Dr. Renate Klein is a biologist and sociologist. She's been a radical feminist critic of reproductive and genetic technologies, including surrogacy, since the 1980s. And she taught women's studies at Deakin University in Australia. What's that, I hear you ask? There was such a thing, women's studies. Renate would like more young women to join the fight against these dehumanising technologies that treat women like breeders. Guess who else treats and calls women breeders? And children like takeaway products. The title of Renate's presentation is A Discussion of Strategies to Abolish Surrogacy. And I would just mention, some of you will already have a copy of this book, which came out not too long ago, I think, published by Spinifex Press. I got a copy just a month or so ago. Renate has a chapter in that book. It's a great book. Thanks, Renate.
Thank you very much, Anna, for your rousing words. And power to you and power to us. And we do need it, that's true. And since I'm talking about strategies today, I will not really talk about why I think that all of surrogacy has to be abolished, all of it, altruistic as well as commercial. But there is a handout, and if you haven't got one, there's a few more copies that Susan would give you. So I'm not going to talk to that. If there's questions that some of you think, oh, maybe it's not so bad, maybe in the discussion we can get to this. But I will go straight to the strategies. And as Anna mentioned, I have a chapter in this latest book, which is actually an international compilation of chapters from women everywhere, because we do actually have an international resistance against surrogacy. We Stop Surrogacy Now, which has existed since 2015, started in the US, but it's international. And then this one is from CIAMS, who is a French organization, but also international, and they're doing a great job in trying to cope with all the surrogacy advances in Europe. All right, now to the strategies. Strategy to stop surrogacy number 1, decrease demand. This is an excellent opportunity at the moment to interfere. You will all have heard about the horrible cases in Ukraine. These poor people, and as Anna said, women and children suffering. But there is also a group of women in Ukraine who are so-called surrogate mothers, a misnomer, of course, it is a suitcase. But anyway, Ukraine has become quite a center for international surrogacy. And if you have read The Age this morning, there is a paper that celebrates that a premature born baby has luckily been gotten out of Ukraine. And that is a surrogacy baby, although I don't like that term. Now, of course, we are all happy that this baby, lives and presumably will have a good life afterwards. But we need to actually really challenge the whole idea that it is okay to go overseas, hire and pay for a poor woman who then gives her womb. In the case of a gay couple, that also needs an egg donor who is, the drugs are very dangerous. She can lose her own life or her own fertility. And then just go in, get this baby away from the mother, who never even gets a chance to hold her, probably will never see her again in her life, and whisk her away. And as Anna actually said, it is also a human rights violation of the child that has never agreed to be a takeaway baby. And yet, all those rights are totally forgotten. Surrogacy contravenes CEDAW, it contravenes the UN Slavery Act. It contravenes about every UN convention there ever was. nobody seems to take any notion of that. In the babies in Ukraine at the moment, there is one organization from Australia that plays a very big role, and it is Sam Everingham's organization called Growing Families. He had so many names of his thing. Sam Everingham prides himself of helping people to finally get their dream child, despite the fact that New South Wales, Queensland and the ACT have legislation in place that makes it a criminal act to go to do commercial surrogacy anywhere, but especially to go internationally for commercial surrogacy. But you know what? Not a single person has been prosecuted. Not a single person. So they arrive back at the border with their baby, crying. Probably they pricked it a bit so it would cry. The border force person is not going to stop that crying baby from coming in. Poor baby, okay, in you go. Not one person has been prosecuted. We have tried, we're still trying. This is actually one of the main missions of our Abolish Surrogacy Australia group. They will come and Sam Everingham, who has made $2 million, because you have to pay to go to his seminars that he gives in all cities, and he introduces IVF clinics from Argentina, from Ukraine, from US, in those states where it's prohibited to go overseas. And he was challenged on the 730 report, and whether he was actually doing something illegal to talk to these people. And he said, we don't like these laws. Now, if I go in a car, I don't like putting a seatbelt on. I'm being stopped by a police person, and I say, I don't like wearing a seatbelt. Do you think I'm getting away with it? That's Sam. That's our Sam. Anyway, I'll get to Sam later. So when people say, oh, surrogacy is so nice, you know, these women give the gift of life, as it's often called, just engage them in a conversation and say, what do you think is nice about, you know, these women being treated as breeders and the baby not knowing who their birth mother was, etc. Not easy, but you can do it. The second one is we need to again and again and again have a discussion on childlessness. Many of us have never wanted babies. Some have not been able to have babies, and I have done a lot of work on infertility, and I know how terrible that can be. I'm not trying to, not talk about that. But it is possible to live a very good life without having your own biological children. And if you're so desperate to have children in your life, there's many, many ways of having children in your life, either through your profession or by seriously helping a friend or a sister or a brother with their children. So we need to also use the term child-free, which used to be the common term in the 80s, but that's all gone out. The next strategy, number 3, we have to have more supportive gay men who are against surrogacy. At the moment, really, there's Gary Powell in the UK, who's fantastic, and he has also an article in this book. He's the representative in Europe of the Stop Surrogacy Now, and he really, calls it for what it is. And because sometimes when you say, okay, men, shouldn't be able to use surrogacy, they say, oh, but you're really homophobic. Well, as a lesbian, no one's actually said that to me, but they do say to people in general. To which you just have to respond very calmly, there is no right to a child for anybody, whether they're gay, or heterosexual, or whatever. Binary, but non-binary. I'm not going into the trends. There have been cases, actually, but very few so far, but will come. And since women don't exist anymore, Well, I mean, what am I talking about? I should just stop now. Since there's no women that can be surrogates. So gay men, really, really important. And I mean, I know gay men who say, yeah, I don't like this stuff. But are they going to speak out? No. Because all the gay organizations, more or less, talk Greens, talk Labour, they all think surrogacy is wonderful. And gay men, it's become a social disability that they can't have babies. And so I was talking to a woman at a conference about how dangerous, doing surrogacy is for the birth mother and the egg donor. And she agreed with me on all of this. The drugs are very dangerous and all of that. And then she said, yes, but how else can gay men have babies? And I just had to remind her that actually men can't really have babies. And again, it's not to say that men can't care for babies, but has got to be their little precious genes in them. Well, actually only one sort of gene from one of the babies. Except they mix them, sometimes the sperms, I don't know. Next strategy, removing commercial interest in surrogacy pimps. And back to my favorite subject, Sam Everingham. I have put so many boxes on him. Doesn't work. It will one day. It's either him or me. Anyway, surrogacy pimps. So, we have actually a sympathetic ear in the Federal Attorney General's office. However, surrogacy in Australia is regulated in all the different states. So we actually have to get to the different states. We have written to the Attorney General of Queensland, and who got the most bland response back, of course not engaging with anything. There's also an MP in Sydney who has said forever he will do something. There are some MPs in Western Australia. We will get there, but it's really hard. So that's the surrogacy pimps and growing surrogacy. Then the next one is organizing and lobbying governments. I mean, some of us are much better with these things than others. I'm not particularly good. Luckily for us, in a way, is that the main action on terms of government organizations is actually happening in Europe. There is the Hague Conference on Private International Law, and that's been going since 2015. And they're working on a parentage /surrogacy project. And they started wanting to do a convention on surrogacy, but that didn't really work because some of the delegates didn't really want to go there. We have a very nice delegate from Australia. His name is John Pascoe. He's a retired family court judge, very good man. He said to me, look, I'd really like it to stop, but we can't stop it because it's happening. Now, those of us who have also been active in the fight against prostitution know this argument. No, we can't stop it because prostitution is here. It's the oldest, what they say oppression. And yes, you can say you can stop it. And you have to get it before the babies are born. You have to get it before the people pay huge amounts of money, go over there, have embryos created, and then find this poor woman who carries their child. You have to stop them here, now, and say, don't go, otherwise you end up in jail. That's what's needed. But unfortunately, and I really have to say that, last year there were two new organizations. One is called CHIP, or actually one is called CHIP, and the other one is not a new organization, it's the old International Social Services, ISS. But they have done these wonderful Verona principles. Now, principles, haven't we had other principles, like the Jakarta principles? They like doing principles. So I have suggested actually to the ICANS women who are doing fantastic work against them that we should just call them feminist principles, our principles. They are very, very, very deceptive because they say, it has good surrogacy and has bad surrogacy. So we need to regulate. We only want the good surrogacy. And the good surrogacy means it protects the rights of children. And so they go on and on and on. I'll just read you one sentence from CHIP. Child identity protection strives to ensure that there is integrity, transparency, and accessibility for every child's identity in name, nationality, and family relations, with expeditious restoration whenever elements are missing. And the Verona principles say exactly the same. Now, unfortunately for us, there are some very, very powerful people behind this. One of them is called Maud de Boer, and her last name I can't pronounce, something like Bukicho. And she was the former UN Special Rapporteur on the sale and sexual exploitation of children. So she has the contacts of the whole UN system. And I had to stop actually a friend of mine who said, oh, look at her, look how powerful, look this name behind us. We can use her, and say she is from the devil, almost as bad as Sam, but not quite. And because it's these people, they appeal to the common man and woman in the street by saying, you have to protect the children. It's the same thing as they can't abolish prostitution, we have to regulate it. Very, very dangerous organizations. Now, how am I going time? 2 more minutes.
We don't have to rush for time because since this was printed, the program, one person actually withdrew this morning. So,
okay, then I don't have to. Breathe. Well, there's one strategy that actually I think we should all think about it. It's certainly not pertinent, I think, to this group, but to the group of women as a sex class in general. And I have called it Stop the Glorification of Sacrifice and Self-Harm by Women, which I call, not my term, the compassion trap. You know how it goes. As women, we're nice, we're kind, we do everything. Now, there's nothing wrong between nice and being kind and having compassion and empathy. It is wrong when you do it at the expense of your own body and your own self and your own life. Now, look at altruistic surrogacy. Some people say, yeah, commercial surrogacy is bad, we don't want to pay for it. But altruistic is so lovely. They do it for love and a lot of compensation, mind you. And in some countries like the UK, they get maternity leave afterwards, despite the fact they don't actually have a baby to look after. But hey, why not use it if it's available? But it's exactly in those cases, and in this book, Broken Bombs, which is a compilation of women who are surrogate mothers who've actually written their own stories about what that meant for them, and some egg donors as well. And there's a story by an Australian woman from far north Queensland, and absolutely classic textbook. She had a favorite cousin. The favorite cousin had cancer, couldn't have babies, and said to her, oh, so very much want to have a baby. Do you think you could have one for me? And she said, of course I can. And so it all started. It already went pear-shaped during the pregnancy because the cousin couldn't cope with the fact that she was pregnant, that her cousin was pregnant, not her. It was just dreadful from the beginning. It didn't get any better when the baby was born, but she did hand him over. It went to family court. It has the most dreadful ramifications. It's now 5 years since this baby was born. They're still in court. There's always something more that comes up and they're fighting one another. These two cousins who loved one another hate one another. Plus, they have divided the whole family. They're not speaking to one another anymore. And that's the other thing that we don't, many people don't actually realize. When there is an altruistic surrogacy, it disrupts whole families. But going back more to this whole thing about giving that women do, I found a case of a nurse who in England said that donating her eggs towards a surrogate pregnancy was the best thing she has ever done in her life. And this is a quote. She felt through donating her eggs, her body, quote, which I'd neglected and loathed throughout most of my life, forever changed itself, had healed itself. And she said she was forever changed by this beautiful journey, an incredible process fueled by empathy and understanding. Now, when I read these words, my blood almost curdled, because often you can say, well, when somebody says, oh yes, I'm an egg donor, I'm a surrogate, they have no idea what it actually means in terms of the processes. They have to go through IVF. And just to remind you, IVF is a very unsuccessful technology that still hasn't got more than 30% success rate at the most, because these are fertile women. It could be a bit better, which is also better for the IVF programs, because they want higher success rates. So, but in this case, this is a nurse. She knew perfectly well what she was doing when she was undergoing these processes. And yet, she said, best thing I've ever done in my life. So I really think we need to engage in deep discussion about such behaviors with women of all ages, classes, skin colors, sexual orientation, global locations. And it's actually not just in relation to surrogacy. It's in relation to almost everything. How many times have you heard women say, I know I should have left, but I just couldn't because of the kids. Or, I know I should have asked for more help, but I knew that if I did, then I would be beaten up. So it's all those kinds of things, and I am not suggesting that it is easy to say enough of that.